You should have noticed that as you were working yesterday and coming up with your bullet points to go with your thesis statements, that little stories began to pop up in your mind. And yesterday we had our main idea in our big rectangle, and then we had our different supporting details, and we came up with our little statements to go with it. And you started thinking about all these ideas and all these experiences that you had. And what we're going to do today is practice taking those statements and turning them into mini essays themselves. All right, so to start off, let's just take a look at these guidelines for writing supporting stories for essays. Writers usually include a transition into the story, such as the story needs to have a beginning, middle, and end. The story needs to be told to especially reveal the part of it that illustrates the thesis statement and the bullet point, the reason. At the end of this story, it's usually wise to include a sentence that refers back to or repeats the main idea of the paragraph. So the next thing you're going to see is me going through these steps with our I love ice cream thesis statement. And after you see me practice that, you are going to go practice that as well. So today we're going to be looking at the work that we did yesterday, coming up with our little stories underneath our boxes. And what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these and write more about it and turn it into a mini story. So as we just talked about the guidelines for writing, we're going to make sure that we include the transitions, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it needs to make sure that it ties back into this box up here and this box up here, right? So I'm going to choose that Baskin Robbins is my favorite ice cream shop, and that it's known for having 31 flavors, and some they have and others they rotate. So that's the one that I'm going to choose. And then I'm going to start my new piece of paper. And I'm not just going to write that. I already wrote that. That's my idea. Now I'm going to tell a story about that. So I'm going to say, when I was in high school, there was a Baskin Robbins near the park where I had cross-country practice. And that's important because that tells you about that I'm talking about Baskin Robbins, and it gives you a transition into my story because it tells you when it's taking place. So you can have other transitions, but that's my way of telling you, kind of setting the setting and the tone and where that story is and all of that. So I'm going to start. When I was in high school, there was a Baskin Robbins near the park where I had cross country practice. And I have to make sure that I go back to the fact that I love ice cream and the fact that there are so many flavors. I have to keep those two things in mind. This isn't a random Baskin Robbins story, although I have a lot of those. That's not what I'm doing. I need to talk about how there are so many flavors and that I love ice cream. So oftentimes after practice, my best friend and I would stop to get ice cream. And this next part is really important because I'm going to say we both really loved ice cream. Ice cream is two words. I didn't mean to put them together like that. So ice cream. And that's important because that's my thesis statement of my whole assignment. My whole essay is eventually going to be about ice cream. So now I've said that I really love it. All right, so I've gotten that out of the way. That's the beginning of my story. The middle of my story, I'm going to tell you about my trip to Baskin Robbins. Okay. when we would stare at the counter, there were 31 flavors staring back at us. I've also now said that Baskin-Robbins has 31 flavors, which is back to the whole point that there are a lot of different flavors of ice cream. So when we would stare at the counter, there were 31 flavors staring back at us. My favorite has always been chocolate chip. But I really wanted to try the others. One day I saw that they offered samples. I started trying a new one each time. I always got one scoop of chocolate chip, and if I liked the sample flavor, I got it too. So that is my beginning up here, and then my middle is about my trip to Baskin-Robbins and how I realized they had samples, and now I have to have an ending to my story. So my ending is going to be this, and I'm going to use a transition, and my transition is going to be nowadays. Nowadays, I mostly just get chocolate chip, but sometimes I'm feeling adventurous. Okay, that's my ending. So this is my entire story. This is my mini story based on my thesis that I love ice cream, and based on my first idea that I love ice cream because there are so many flavors, based on that Baskin-Robbins has all those flavors. So you can see how we started by coming up with the thesis, and then we came up with the ideas to support that. We did that work before fall break. And then yesterday, we worked on coming up with little stories to support our rectangle idea. Now today, you need to choose one of those and write your story. All right, so you are going to do that. If you want to do it in your notebook, you can, but your assignment today is going to be to submit that via the text box. So if you want to keep it, then you want to write it in your notebook. Otherwise, you should go ahead and just type it in there. And then if you ever need to go back and look at it, I can help you if you ask me how to go back and look at your assignments in Canvas. You always have access to what you turned in. But that's your assignment today. Your assignment today is to take what we did yesterday, choose one of them, and turn it into a story that meets those guidelines for writing that we talked about at the beginning of this lesson.